So let's dive into the 3 Days Grace album, Explosions. So this one again nominated for Rock Album of the Year. You're an engineer on this album. 4 singles: So-Called Life, Neurotic, Lifetime, I Am the Weapon. What's insane, and I've said this before on the podcast, is there's no band in human history that's had more #1 singles on the Billboard rock charts than
In the
3 Days
US.
Grace in the US. Like, that's as big as it gets. So they've had 17 #1 singles on the rock charts, rock and alternative rock. 2 of those, so they had 15, and then 2 more from this album go to #1. It's wild. If you get just one #1 song, that's unbelievable. To have 17, which is more than a full album's worth, not just of hits or hit singles, but legit #1 singles. I can't even like put into words how incredible this is. So do you have anything to say about the 2 #1s that came off of that album? So So-Called Life and Lifetime.
Yeah, so this was a definite pandemic record because the guys were writing in the first part of the pandemic, which they would have done regardless because they had their album cycle from Outsider, and then they had the touring cycle to tour the album, and then they already planned on writing or just, taking some time off anyways for 2020. So timing for them really worked out. And then when they came back and wanted to record, I think there was still issues with like crossing the border. So Barry lived in the US, the guitar player. So it was very pieced together one by one. So Barry basically flew to LA and recorded guitars with Mike Plotnikoff and Howard Benson. We got the guitars and started recording vocals first, which is very unusual flow. Usually you do drums and bass and guitar and then vocals, but we started with guitar to get the rhythm section right. And then we needed to do vocals because Matt was expecting a baby. He lives a little up north in the area of Peterborough, and he didn't want to come all the way to a studio because what if the baby comes early? Like, he wanted to be there for his son. So obviously we had to figure something out. So we, like me and Darren, we went up north to Neil, the drummer's chalet. He has a little like amazing place out there with so much forest around, and we stayed there for a week. But before we did that, we went up for a weekend and built a vocal booth in a closet, in a walk-in closet. The downside is there was no AC, so whenever it got hot, you kind of had to get out of the booth. So there is downsides and upsides for everything. But then we brought up really high-end equipment and had to do a test too and send it to Howard Benson, who was the producer. And when he agreed, yes, this vocal quality is great. Like, you can't tell it's not in studio. Like, you guys did a great job. Cool. Then we went up for a whole week and he sang 1 to 2 songs a day. And this way, it was only 5 minutes from his home. If anything were to happen, or, his partner's getting a kid, like, he was immediately accessible. And it also came, I think, a week or 2 after. So the timing was really good. But it was also nice to just, not just be in the safety zone of the studio that and you kind of know the ins and outs, but to be, recording on a laptop with still high-end equipment, and we still use great mics, but it was all a little different. So we had to make sure that at all times, okay, we have to close the windows because if somebody's driving by, you can't hear that, things like that. You have different challenges. So that happened. Then we sent that back to the editor. No, actually to Howard to comp it. He sent it to the editor. We got it back from the editor and then recorded drums in the studio. So Neil came by to the studio. We did it in, I think, 2 weeks. I think we had some days extra, so he used them for his own projects as well. And then Brad, the bass player, came down to the studio for 2 days, and we did bass last. So that's a very unusual way to record, but because they already had very organized, they knew the song structure, they knew, what they want to achieve and what kind of sound they want. And they are also experienced enough to do it that way. I would never recommend that to a band that's new, but they've done enough records and they all know what they're capable of. And they know also their limits. for Matt, for the vocals, he knew when his voice is starting to not be prime. And that's when we had to stop and be like, you know what? Take a break, because if we break your voice now, you can't sing tomorrow. So, just that's it. Like, see you tomorrow. And like, it's just everyone is so experienced already. They knew how it all fits together and how it all works. And it came out amazing. Like, I love the record. I love the songs on it. Yeah.
Yeah, it is unusual. The bed tracks is normally, the drums and bass laying the foundation, and then everything's playing on top of that and building from that foundation. So to do it kind of in reverse shows the level of quality of the musicians, of the engineers, to kind of build this structure differently.
Yeah. Now, like, I think when they did record guitars, they had like fake drums to play to. So it's not like he played just to a click. And they had like I think it was just a reference vocal, so he knows where in the song he is. But there wasn't much more to it. So yeah, it was very, very different. And it was always as, okay, like, this is the real tracks, and we have to, like, take this away now. Like, we had to, for example, take the vocals away that we recorded and import the ones that were already edited in the final vocals. So it was very interesting to work different, but it shows you can if you need to. And it was definitely during the pandemic, nobody could fly anywhere. The band was literally separated because Barry, the guitar player, was in the States. So all of the songwriting would have also happened over Zoom.
It's a very pandemic album.
Yeah. Hence explosions,
Yeah. So speaking of drummers, so Neil Sanderson to me is one of those rare drummers that has the ability to create hooks with his drums. So normally hooks you think is like a vocal thing or a guitar thing. But to me, there's just a few drummers like John Wysocki of Stained, or Chad Saliga of Breaking Benjamin, and then Neil Sanderson of 3 Days Grace. To me, those three, it's this special gift they have of adding these little hooks that you don't know why, but it's just something extra they add. Do you agree with that statement? Do you know what I'm talking about?
I do, yeah. He is an amazing drummer for so many reasons. One, the way he drums, yeah, like how he arranges what he drums when, it does create certain hooks. Like, I can play you the drums of I Hate Everything About You, and you'd know it's that song without hearing the rest, right? Like, that's definitely a very catchy one. But aside from that, he hits really hard. And if I say really hard, I mean, I think he is about as hard as Jordan from Alexis, if not even slightly harder. Like, he hits one song and there's a full-on dance in the snare. But that makes the tone. And I think a lot of people don't realize it's not just about tuning drums. It's not just about recording drums. If the drummer doesn't hit the drums, you don't get the resonance. Now for jazz, it's a whole nother thing because you have all the dynamics in there. But for rock, you want a hard hitter. And when we did the drive-in show, so we recorded a live show for 3 Days Grace to open for Metallica while there was the pandemic going on. And like, it was, I think, in 200 theaters or something at the same time. He actually killed 2 of our SM57s. He just decapitated them with his
The
hand.
microphones just took the top right off.
And they're microphones that you can talk to any audio engineer. They're usually undestroyable. But give it to Neil Sanderson and he just decapitates them. Like, the capsule was completely just broken. I couldn't even put it, like, I kept one just because I'm like, this is insane. I'll never in my life see that again, because that is just how hard he hits. Like, during the live show too, he hit this big of a chunk out of the cymbals. And I'm talking like it started with this chunk and another chunk and another chunk. And I was like, how hard are you hitting during one live show, man? But it makes the sound. And I can tell that because Darren has a drum set here that he owns. And a lot of bands start using his drum set unless they are sponsored or have their own. They usually just don't want to like carry it around, or if it's for a single, And I know the drum set. I know how it sounds. I know how I mic it up, how it generally turns out to sound. And there's the odd time an indie band comes. I'm like, what's wrong with the drums? something doesn't sound right, but I'm doing exactly everything I usually do it. Like the mic placement is right, like the cues are right, like what's going on? And then I look at the drummer, I'm like, oh, he doesn't hit the drums. That's when you can tell when you like put the mic gain up a bit more and it still doesn't sound the same. Like you have to hit the drums with all, like full rock, once again. When you have a drummer like Lionel Lewis, very different story. Like he makes the drums sing in a very different way. They sound good, but he doesn't play hard. He can, but he doesn't have to. It's very different that way. But yeah, it makes a lot of his tone.